over what we want. Teach us to forgive and be forgiven. Help us to rise above negativity and stay away from the actions that hurt us and others. Amen.
How about now? How about now? Hey! Fantastic. Recap. So that Jesus is teaching that's going to have lots of to-dos, lots of this is how we live in the world as Jesus followers. This is started not with, hey, we got to get it together, folks. Not with, okay, here's your things to do. But Jesus starts with a blessing. Jesus starts with, you are blessed. You among us, sitting on this hill along the side of the Sea of Galilee, you here, you are blessed. You here who feel oppressed because you are. These are people under the rule of the Roman authorities. They don't have the freedoms that we have, or even that they had maybe a couple hundred years before. They don't have the ability to do the things that they would like to do. They don't have the same kind of freedoms. And yet, these oppressed people are told by Jesus, you're blessed. You need to know this first and foremost. You are loved by God. You are blessed by our God. Because we don't respond and do the things that we're asked to do because just for funsies, but we respond out of the love that we're given by Jesus. So we start with this blessing. He says the Creator's blessing rests on these. Not a to-do list, but instead reorienting us to see other people, to see the world, to see our experiences, to see ourselves the way Jesus does. We're often our own hardest critic, right? We're often maybe more judgmental or critical of ourselves than we even are of our dearest friends. And Jesus sees us as blessed. Jesus is reminding us of this truth right at the beginning, that we are loved, that we are blessed. And this list, the first 3 that we did last week, we'll do 3 more today. This list is not saying the wealthy ones, the ones with fancy robes, the ones who have honor, the ones who have huge families, the ones who are in positions of authority, those are not the ones that Jesus is saying are blessed. Not the ones who have well-behaved children in a big house and a fancy car and a great job and an amazing education. Those aren't the ones Jesus is saying are blessed first. But instead, he's saying it's the outsiders. It's the ones who feel like they're a hot mess most of the time. The ones who feel like they're just trying to get by. Jesus is saying, you're blessed by our God. The ones who are powerless or humble, who are the outsiders, the marginalized, the ones who have the least power, the least honor, Jesus turns to them and says, you are blessed by our God. This was in complete opposition to Greek and Roman culture. Everything was about honor and status. Where you sat at a meal was about how important you were. What you wore was about how important you were. Who you did or did not speak to, associate with, everything was about honor or shame or power or not. And so Jesus is turning their culture on a head, and what they've been taught by the Romans, by Greek culture, what they had been absorbing into their culture as well. And Jesus is saying, no, instead, blessed are the ones who are quiet, who are meek, not the ones shouting for their rights, shouting to get everything for themselves. So that's our recap. We started with all of these blesseds last week. Today I want to ask you a question, and I want you to share with somebody nearby. What is your favorite food? It can be a dessert, it can be a meal, it can be a single thing. What's your favorite food? Pizza. I heard pizza out here. Okay, you've shared with the neighbor. Now shout out a couple more. Thank you for shouting out first. What else? Favorite foods? Ice cream, especially this time of year, get as much as you can. What else? Popcorn. It's my favorite meal. I love popcorn. What else? What'd you say? Mozzarella sticks? All day, every day. Yep. What other favorites? Caesar salad. You know, my aunt made me a Caesar salad when I was visiting recently, and it was like the best Caesar salad I've ever had. That's a good one. It's so refreshing, but like got that great crisp crunch. That's a good one. Okay, so we all have favorite foods. And whenever you're walking near a restaurant, we went out to see The Matrix with our family on Thursday. And so we went to Phoenix Theaters. It was the first time my kids had seen it, so it was super fun. We went out to Red Robin for dinner first, but you can smell all the different restaurants as you walk past one. And all I could smell was French fries. French fries have that, whether they're good French fries or average French fries, they smell amazing no matter what. Fresh baked bread or cookies or pie, these smells. Every time I'm cooking dinner, I almost always use garlic and onions in pretty much everything. And somebody in the house says, that smells good. I'm like, all it is, garlic and onions. But it's so aromatic, right, and delicious. So now I want you to think, now that you've been thinking about food, when were you really, really hungry? Like rumbling, ever been in a meeting or in church, and you're like, I think everybody just heard my stomach rumble? Maybe you were fasting for a day or a couple days, and you start to feel it in more than just your stomach. You kind of feel it everywhere. Maybe you just got busy and forgot to eat. That happens too. When I spent a semester in Israel, and one of the classes was an archaeology class. So we went out once a week to a dig, and we're out in the hot sun, zero shade, in August in Israel, and it was just blazing, and we were absolutely starving by the time we got to our meal. And even if it was a peanut butter and jelly falafel with a bottle of water, that was the tastiest meal we had had ever in our lives. And I also remember, if you've ever been out of the country for an extended period of time, you miss certain things from back home. And I remember craving mac and cheese. All I wanted was a dumb box of Kraft mac and cheese. And one of my friends had sent me a care package, and we snuck into the kitchen at night and figured out all the things in the kitchen and made a box of Kraft mac and cheese. And it was the best meal we'd ever had because we had missed Kraft mac and cheese so much. Today we're talking about being hungry and having blessed appetites. Our Beatitudes are going to tie together today, our three here in the middle of Jesus' teaching, our three Beatitudes. And some of them are more active. So last week, our Beatitudes are not active ones. It's just declaring who is blessed. It's not doing anything to get blessed. And yet some of our Beatitudes today are a little bit more active. So they're not necessarily a to-do list, but at the same time, these are things that are describing ways of becoming more mature as a human, spiritually, in a relationship with God. And what we'll do today is a little bit different. There's my bulletin. So in your bulletin, we're going to read together each of them as we go through. And then after each one, we're going to just take a pause and give you some space for prayer. Give you some space to talk to God about how you're experiencing that particular beatitude, something that God has brought to mind for you to write down or reflect on. So just kind of know the flow is a little bit different. We'll take a couple pauses and breaks in between for reflection. Because I don't know if you're like me, but, if I learn something, it's not too long before that just kind of trickled right out my ear the other direction. So we'll take a little bit of pausing. So for this first one, I'd love for us to read it together, just this first beatitude for today. Blessed are the ones who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. When we feel hungry or thirsty, it's a message from our body, from our brain, telling us you need something. Sometimes when we're craving certain foods, we might need that nutrient. You might be craving salt and be low on sodium, or you're craving something. And sometimes it's an emotional craving that our body gives us as well, but it's an important message to pay attention to. Often, if you're feeling really thirsty, you might be close to being dehydrated. If you've fasted for too long, your body will start to shut down certain things so that your brain can keep things running as they should be going. If we don't listen to our body, it's not healthy to skip meals and for extended periods of time necessarily, and to go without water. And I don't know if you've ever experienced what we like to call being hangry. It's when you're angry because you're hungry, a state of anger caused by a lack of food. If you've ever experienced, our children tend to experience this first. I remember certain times with my kids, I'm like, why are they losing their mind right now? And I realize, it's snack time. It is snack time. Let's feed the children. Grown-ups need this also. Grown-ups need snacks and water and food. One of my favorite stories is when Elijah is dealing with the prophets of Baal. And he's chased by the king and the queen. He runs away. He has this terrible experience. And he says to God, I am the only one left who worships you, Lord. And Elijah's out in the wilderness, and he's been dealing with this very emotional, big spiritual situation. The Lord calls down fire from heaven, all these things. And here he is out in the wilderness, feeling alone, tired, angry at everyone around him. And the Lord sends him food, and the Lord tells him to take a nap. Sometimes our bodies just need food and rest to recalibrate our emotions, to recalibrate ourselves. This metaphor that Jesus uses is in this first beatitude brings these things to mind. That when we lack something, when we are lacking water, we're lacking food, maybe again lacking rest, our body's calling out for it. Our brain is calling out for it. And Jesus is saying, it's not just food that you're hungry for. It's not just water that you're thirsty for. The twist is it's righteousness that you're deeply craving at the core of your being. You're craving this righteousness of God. And he says that is such a blessed state of being when you're